and welcome to Committed and Covered, the Pink Couch edition. So glad to have you all here with us today. Happy Sabbath. I hope everyone has had a good day so far. I am your host for this episode of Committed and Covered, Kim Roper, and I have a lovely panel of guests with me today that I want to introduce you to. Right here to my left is my youngest daughter, Eden, who is a senior in high school. And on the far end, some of you may recognize Jolynn. She's been on Praise Cafe many times and sometimes does the announcements, so she's a familiar face. But she's also, guys, just a senior in high school, believe it or not. She's very mature for her age, and so I'm happy to have these young ladies on with us today. And then these ladies here in the middle are our experts on the panel as we begin this discussion about boundaries. We have Dr. Matthews and Mrs. Atante Myers, who I will let you all introduce yourselves in just a moment to tell us your area of expertise. And again, as I said, today our topic is boundaries. Boundaries in relationships, boundaries in our lives, and all the various ways that we might need to be thinking about boundaries as a way to protect our personal space, our mental health. And this is a conversation that we actually began during the Women's Empowerment Weekend. I don't know how many of you out there who attended the Women's Empowerment Weekend that we had the first weekend in February. It was an amazing event. And everyone here, at least were there at some point during the weekend. Our ladies in the center were, of course, on our pink panel discussion during the weekend. And so I am very excited to have you all back. Really, this is sort of the boundaries conversation part 2, because we started it on the weekend. And some of you weren't able to be a part of it, which is also why we're here today, so that you can get in on some of that good conversation that we began. Real quick, though, before we get into the conversation, I do want to invite those of you who did attend the Empowerment Weekend to let us know how that was. If you're in the comments, feel free to share. Also, very, very much need your feedback. If you could scan that QR code, that will take you to our quick survey, because in order for us to know how best to continue the kind of programming that you're interested in, we need to know what was working for you and what didn't, or what suggestions you have for how we might make it even better next time. So I would appreciate your feedback. And again, thank you all for being here. I see Elizabeth, Kimberly, Kanique, so good to see you guys. Happy Sabbath. Kanique says it was awesome. Kanique is so great. She's always supportive of our programming, and we just love having her. I spoke to her last week about it as well. All right, so we're going to get into this conversation, guys. So invite someone if you are watching and you know that you have a friend, a girlfriend, a mom, an aunt, a grandma. Send the link to her and tell her to get in on this conversation, because, again, boundaries is something that is very important. It is something that you probably have talked about at some time or another, even if you didn't call it boundaries. But when we talk about the kinds of, sometimes the challenges that we have in relationships, inevitably it circles back to this topic, right? And so that's what we're going to get into a little bit today. And I was very intentional about the guests that I invited to our panel today, because I'm the director of Women's Ministries. And sometimes I have young people who look at me and go, oh, that's the thing for old people. And then I have older people who are older than me look at it and go, oh, that's so nice what you young people are doing. And I'm like, guys, hello, we're women. Young women, older women, we're women. And that's what this ministry is here for, women, regardless of how old or young you are. And so I am so thankful that these ladies agreed to be here, because they represent the spectrum of ages and experiences. And I think that this conversation, especially, it's good to have with the various ages of women, because we are experiencing boundaries differently because of the season that we're in, right? All right, so I want to have Dr. Matthews and Mrs. Myers share a little bit about your background, because other than being the spectrum of ages here, we also have the spectrum of experience and expertise. And I think that what the two of you bring, especially to this conversation, is some knowledge of this topic from the professional perspective. And so if you would just share very briefly for those who may not know what your background is and what you do professionally.
Okay, I have a doctoral degree in clinical psychology. I'm a licensed psychologist. My husband and I own a psychological practice, and I did teach here at Oakwood for 25 years. And I've been married for 53 years, have 3 children and 9 grandchildren.
Awesome.
I had to throw that in.
Yes, of course.
Yes, well, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am the mental health therapist here at Oakwood University. And I have my private practice, New Beginning Counseling, here in Huntsville, where I see clients as well. And I've been married for 25 years and 2 grandchildren.
Okay.
One is still baking, so
Okay.
but he'll be here in June.
That's a good month to be born.
Right.
We got a June baby over here. Awesome. Well, guys, I want to get into this conversation, and I want to just begin first by asking you, when I said we're going to talk about boundaries today, what was the first thing that came to your mind? And anyone can answer.
Well, I guess I'll go first. When I heard about this topic, in fact, me and Eden were together when we found out about the topic. I was like, that's a good topic to touch on, because especially as a young person, that's not something that's often talked about, especially as you're navigating relationships, friendships, all the ships, as they say. And so I think having this conversation with licensed professionals and just people who are older than us to see how we set those boundaries correctly and in a healthy way is an important conversation to have.
Well, I first thought, well, we just had this discussion 2 weeks ago, so it's but it's always on my mind, because dealing with clients in therapy, boundaries comes up all the time. It's a huge topic, and it's a huge thing to learn for a lot of people. So it's something we deal with all the time.
And one thought comes to me: when boundaries are broken, it can affect you emotionally, it can affect you physically. And so if you don't understand boundaries, then you end up having difficulties in relationships. And we are relationship type people.
Right.
You know, once the Lord created Adam and Eve, it's been 2+ going on farther. So relationships is important in setting those boundaries. It kind of sets kind of the climate of how the relationship is going to go.
Yeah, similarly to what Jolene said, I don't know much about boundaries, but I do have some experiences that I can share. But I'm also here to learn more from licensed professionals as well, because I definitely need help on it as well. So.
And I think it's important for us to have this conversation with these young people, that they begin to understand boundary setting, because they are in the thick of relationships and establishing relationships, whether it's friendships or romantic relationships, that could potentially affect them for the rest of their life.
Right.
Yeah. So my next question is what does boundary setting look like then? Like we're throwing this term around, but what is it that we mean by boundary setting?
I like to share that it's like a protective barrier that you have to set for yourself, because no one's going to put that out there for you. So you set the boundary where you feel comfortable with. If you don't want to, if it's in a relationship and you only want to have a certain type of relationship or this person to get this close to you, then you set the boundary where you lay it down where you don't want them to cross. But you have to do that, because nobody's going to do it for you.
That's right. Yeah.
And again, that's the hard part for a lot of people, because they think, I don't want to be mean, I don't want to hurt their feelings, but at the same time, they're not being kind to themselves.
Right.
They are hurting themselves because that relationship is hurting them.
And then also, when we think of boundaries, there are different types of boundaries. We can think of the physical boundaries, like how close I want to get to you, what type of relationship I want to have with you physically. You can think of boundaries when you think of emotional boundaries, what you're going to allow a person, what they're going to say and how it's going to affect you. You can think of of material boundaries. What I have, what I want to share, what I don't want to share. So when we think of boundaries, there's a wide range and there's a continuum depending on the relationship you have with that person.
Does anyone okay, so let's dig into that a little more in terms of what that might look like.
Okay.
Have any of you on the panel had difficulty setting a boundary with someone? And if so, why? And what was the boundary that you needed to set and maybe had difficulty setting? I see Jolene smiling, so I'm guessing she hasn't.
Say the question one more time.
So when has setting a boundary been difficult in a relationship?
Okay.
And why was it?
So I'm in high school, so of course you meet different types of people all the time. Personalities, some mesh, others don't. And so when I was younger, I used to be a sensitive person. But growing up, of course, that thick skin comes with, learning about you. Don't take it personally. It's just how the person is. However, I had this particular person. They're a classmate, so I see them all the time. And then OAA, you're pretty much in all of your classes with the same people. There's not necessarily a split in classes unless unless your class is really large. And so I had this particular person, the way that their personality is, it was not for me per se, if that makes sense. So they would say certain things that are in a joking way, but I didn't take them that way. And so I didn't want to be the sensitive person and be like, well, I didn't appreciate how you spoke to me, or I didn't want to be that person who did speak up, because there was other people who did feel that way. So it's like, where do you find your medium? And so I had to just be the bigger person, I guess, and just be like, hey, I don't appreciate, I understand it's your personality, but your personality doesn't mesh with mine. So if you could refrain from behaving that way, I don't know if that's the correct word to use, around me, because I don't appreciate it. I don't take it respectful. I don't take it kind. So, yeah.
You were right when you said she was very mature. Because, the fact that she was able to do something like that at, I'm assuming, 17 years old. Yeah, a lot of people don't learn boundaries till later in life. So that was, you handled that very well.
Well, I want to piggyback though on that situation, because now you're talking about someone who's doing something that you don't appreciate because it makes you feel some type of way. But suppose they don't stop. What do you do then? Because you can set a boundary by saying, I don't appreciate that. And they may be like, oh, okay, and then go right on. Right. And so, you only have so much control over the other person. Right. So what should you do then if you're Jolene and they don't stop?
So you can control yourself. So you remove yourself from that situation where you're not in that person's presence. If they're not willing to do that. Being in high school, that's different. Difficult. I shouldn't say it's difficult, but you go to a higher authority to where they know that you're feeling uncomfortable. But you are definitely remove yourself from a situation, because you can control yourself, but you can't control them.
I think something that I've struggled with as well is when putting boundaries in place, I sometimes struggle with not wanting to offend the person, or also not wanting them to completely change our dynamic as a friend, or however the relationship may be, completely changing it altogether. So like in that case, for example, hypothetically speaking, they just stop being your friend. Like they just stop hanging out with you, stop talking to you altogether because they're afraid of hurting your feelings or anything. And I feel like that's where I get a little nervous about setting my own boundaries, because I don't want the friendship to go away, but I also don't want to feel offended or uncomfortable, or that I'm not heard or seen in the relationship. And it's just like how to do that without completely ending everything.
And I think it's also different when we're talking about a classmate versus a friend. With a friend,
yes, that's true.
With me personally, I find that very difficult, because I don't like confrontation. So for me, having that conversation of boundaries is
difficult.
It's difficult because you're like pushing, like, we're like, yeah. But if I'm not with you, it's different.
Yeah.
If it's a true friend, you should be able to have that conversation, and they won't go anywhere.
And you were talking as young people, but that's not just limited to young people. Regardless to what age, you're close to people and you want them to like you, or you want to be with them. But when you find out that you're not who you want to be, or being around them changes you, then you have to decide that I'm going to have to pull back.
Right.
And I think it's also important when you think of boundaries that you can't change other people. All you can do is tell them, what you like and what you don't like. And if they continue to insist, then you do have to come up with strategies. Pulling away, or you're not putting yourself in the same circumstances with them all the time. Or if they're, say, like cracking jokes. Personal jokes are not funny. And people sometimes can be saying something and say, oh, I'm just kidding. No, they're not kidding. That's a
Like an
message.
excuse.
Yes, it's an excuse. And so when you have that, then, and they're putting you down, that's not someone that you want to be around. And so you just choose how you're going to pull back from them.
I think Atante said it best, if they're a true friend. And so it kind of goes to what is your definition of a true friend? And maybe sometimes we are allowing abuse because they're our friend when really they're not, because they're not. And Kim Mann talked about this last night at AY. She talked about, they're actually not for you if they're not protecting you. They don't make you feel loved and all of that. So some of us may need to take a hard look at our friendships and make sure they are actually friends.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we have to remember that just because you've known somebody for a long time doesn't mean you have to be their best friend. Or it doesn't mean that you're going to be their best friend forever. Because I struggle with that as well. I've known a lot of people, and you have to learn that sometimes you grow apart, sometimes you come back together, but some people are just for a season and not for a lifetime. So,
Good one.
Yeah, that was very good.
I saw a comment earlier, I don't know who it was, but they were talking about in Black families that, we've been taught sort of, what happens in this house stays in this house. So, and so I want to speak to that. And then I see Paulie says, keyword real or true friend. The church will make you feel bad about cutting off people who you had to cut off because they refuse to respect your boundaries. And so with both of those comments, I immediately think of when we're in relationships with people who are in authority above us. And they may be inappropriately behaving towards us, that, what happens in this house stays in this house kind of thing, but also other types of authority figures that may make us uncomfortable or not feel protected in one way or another, but yet they're in a position over us. We may or may not be able to remove ourselves from the relationship fully. And so then this question of setting boundaries becomes a little more complex.
Because when you talk about family, that is more difficult to manage boundaries with families. And if you're talking about a young person who's in a situation where you have the family philosophy, what stays in his home doesn't go out, basically, then you can have emotional as well as sexual abuse going on. And the person is being told that you don't tell anyone. And I just want to say a little bit about that, too, that we brought out in the conference the other couple of weeks ago. The idea that 1 out of 3 females are sexually abused. And when we say abuse, sometimes people are thinking that inappropriate touch is not abuse, but it is. And so it's really important for us as older people to let children know that it's okay to share share with someone that you can trust what's going on if you feel that it is harmful to you.
And can we also say to those older people in families, moms, dads, grandmas, aunties, to give the children listen to them.
Yes.
Let them know that you are willing to listen and believe them.
Right.
If this child is telling you Uncle so-and-so makes them uncomfortable, don't be, oh, girl, that's your uncle. Go on over there and give him a kiss. Don't do that. We need to make sure we're listening to the young people in our families and not dismissing them just because they're young.
Right.
And a lot of times families know what's going on, but they just close their eyes and they pretend and say, okay, they know you're going over to Uncle so-and-so's house. And they know what Uncle did to them, but they just close their eyes and pretend like it didn't exist. And that's a serious issue.
I mean, we make excuses for Uncle so-and-so.
Right.
He's just a dirty old man, ha, 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 laugh it off. And so much damage is being done in the meantime. And in addition to that, when those kinds of excuses are made for that behavior, it makes the victim feel as though there's something wrong with them.
Yes.
That in some way or another they are in the wrong, and they will further feel less confident in opening up and sharing how they really feel, even in other relationships.
And when you talk about relating that to boundaries, if you're coming from a family where you did not have freedom,
Right.
or what you said did not matter, or you have been taught basically by how you were treated that you don't have a voice, you don't need to have a voice, you don't rate to have a voice.
You don't have a right to.
You don't have a right to. And that happens many times in our society with females.
If we don't, as parents and even as aunties and grandparents, give them children the space to be able to feel comfortable talking before something serious like this happens, then they're used to that. And they're like, oh yeah, I can talk to mommy and daddy about anything. I can tell them anything. But if we don't give them that space and then a serious thing like this happens, they're not going to feel comfortable coming and telling you.
Yeah. Yeah, guys. So please, let's make sure we're doing our part as parents, as aunties, uncles, to protect our children and to make sure that they feel safe in our presence. Okay, so I want to shift a little bit to the way boundaries function in other relationships. And again, I know we have these young people on, and friendships are everything when you're in high school and college. They mean probably more than any of your other relationships, even your family ones. And so we touched on friendships a little bit. I want to circle back to how boundaries either work or don't work in our so-called friendships and what we consider to be friendships. So I want to begin first with the question about expectations. What expectations do you have of your friends? We're tossing that word around, oh, that's my friend. Is it just because I've known her since I was in kindergarten? Or is there some other thing that makes a person a friend or not?
Generally, you think of a person being a friend if you can trust them, if they're loyal to you, they're not going to say anything that's going to make you feel uncomfortable in their presence. I think that's important. And they like you. You have things in common. And so when you have a person like that, then you can develop to have a closer and closer friendship.
I think it's someone that you can trust and that you're not pouring more into the relationship than they are. And that you can feel that and see that, and they're there for you when you're going through something. They have true empathy for you.
I was gonna say, based off of what Mrs. Myers said, is I learned during COVID that friendships are a two-way street. When a friend, when you're the only one pouring into a friend and it's not being reciprocated, you again have to reevaluate what exactly is this friendship that we're calling this relationship. And so just realizing that it's with any relationship, it's a two-way street. And so if I'm pouring to you, I expect to also be poured into. And I'm not expecting us to have the same personality. I'm not expecting us to have the same, of course, some interests because we're friends. But just a two-way street. A friendship's not a one-way street. And then also that trust factor. I'm a huge person about trust. And I don't let anybody into my circle, if that makes sense. Like, I have to really trust you for me to tell you, not everything, because I don't tell everybody everything, because you don't know who you could trust. But just that trust factor is very huge, like Mrs. Myers said.
I think for me, like you guys said, trust for sure. But two main things is, one, if it's somebody that I know can listen to what I have to say, and I can also listen to what they have to say. Like, it should be I shouldn't just only be hearing your problems without you being able to hear mine and give me advice on mine, if that makes sense, the same way I would do to somebody. And then secondly, I would say somebody who's able to have a serious conversation and also have a funny conversation. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want somebody who's only
goofy.
goofing around and laughing and things like that. Like, that's good for the time, but when I need to have a serious conversation, I want to be able to talk to somebody who can be mature enough to have that conversation and not just make everything a joke. So.
Time and place.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like Pastor Mann touched on that last night also, right? When you have that friend who always is like, oh, ha, let me know when you're feeling better.
Right. And not actually asking, are you okay?
And just being able to
question.
be honest about how you're feeling. Like, even if it's a tough conversation or even if it's uncomfortable or if you're not going to just say positive things in the conversation, it needs to be had. Because if you just keep it balled up, it's never going to heal. It's going to get worse, and then it's going to end horribly, and it never ends well. So.
Paulie C says these babies are old. The wisdom. Sanju says that's good, Jolene. The two-way street and trust circle, and also seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's good. Dr. Matthews, you were going to say
I
something?
was going to say, when we say friends, there are different types of friends. You know, we have a close, like when you're in high school, you probably have more friends. But as you get older, your probably is going to be different. But even whether you're in high school or not, you have a small circle. You know, as you mentioned, you don't tell everybody everything.
Right.
And so you can use the word, oh, that's my friend. But you have to keep in mind, you know, there are different circles. And those that are closer to you, you're going to share more. And then those that are further out in the circle, you're not going to tell them as much.
Yeah.
And you're not going to expect as much from them either.
Yeah. Those expectations are important. Make sure you are paying attention to those the distinctions between those friends that are in your circle versus those who are more of acquaintances.
Right.
Because then you can run into problems where you're sharing with people who are not really in your circle.
Right.
They're not going to protect that secret or that whatever it is that you shared or have good. Exactly.
Right.
So how easy has it been for you all to make friends?
Me and Jolene?
The panel. How easy or not has that been to find those good friends, those individuals that you really could trust?
Well, I know for me, I think I'm very closed-minded when it comes to making friends because I've been at Oakwood all 12 years. So you have people who come in and you have people who come out, of course, but I've literally been there since the CDL. So I've been with the same amount of people for a pretty long time, you know? So I don't really know. I mean, going to like summer camps and stuff, I did find it kind of hard making friends because, again, I don't really trust people like that. And that's a huge factor for me when I'm making friends is, can I trust you? And I'm not saying that I'm going to tell you all the secrets, even if we're friends for, let's just say, the 2 weeks that we're at camp together. But I want to be able to, like, form a bond with you for us to, you know, maybe have some, I'm not saying like Dr. Matthews said, there's different types of friends that you have. You have friends like that's your close circle, and you have friends that might be camp friends, and you know how you have camps even like extracurricular friends, like friends you do soccer with, or friends you do music with. Yeah, so there's different types of friends. So I think that I've had friends like for seasons, not necessarily for long periods of time, besides people that I've gone to school with. And so I don't know, college would be an interesting journey in making friends, at least for me. Yeah.
I would say I have a lot of acquaintances. And I have good childhood friends that have always been in my life. But I have one best friend, and that relationship is different than all of the other relationships. Yeah. I mean, it's easy, but I'm kind of like her. It's not like I'm probably more like her, where I don't trust not that I don't trust, I just don't let people into our inner circle as easily.
Takes
and that's and that's to protect. I mean, I'm a pastor's wife, so that's to protect our family unit as well. Like, if you're coming close in, I need to be able to trust you.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did want to jump for a second to friendships once you're an adult and married. How do friendships change? How do your friendships change? So Dr. Matthews alluded to the fact that she had more friends when she was younger and fewer once she got older. How then does that also change once you are married?
It makes a difference. And for these two who went to Oakwood Academy, I graduated from Oakwood Academy too.
Little plug for Oakwood.
But the thing is, those friends probably have carried me through, they're still friends of mine. But when you get married, number one, you become very close to your husband. In fact, really, my husband is my best friend. That's who I really share most intimate information with. And so you have different types of friends. You have your friends, say, like when you have your young children, and your children's friends become, and their parents become your friends. And again,
Doing life together.
you're doing life together. Then when you get older, for us, we have the children and the grandchildren. None of them live here, so we're traveling, and so you don't have as much time. And then for me, most of the people my age are retired. I'm not, because we have a business, and so time restraints makes a difference.
Right.
And then different health and just life challenges makes a difference the older you get with friendships. And I think of people like a pastor's wife, you would be traveling a lot. Here, I've lived here most of the time, so I have a group of people that I know. I might not talk to them all the time, but when we get together, we enjoy each other's company. But as far as intimate friends that you share really deep things, that tends to be family or maybe one other person. In fact, statistically, people don't have but 1 to 3 very, very close friends. So there are changes as you get older. And then, as you get older, you become, a widower, or you might become divorced, or different things that happen to you in your life that changes your friendships. But you're still looking for the same quality in whoever is your friend. That doesn't change.
Speaking to the friendships after marriage, how important is it to have friends? So obviously, we'll probably all say our spouse is our best friend, right? We're going to share the most with that individual. But how important is it to still have friends outside of your husband?
I think it's good to still have some other people that you talk to, because in reality, you might even talk to them about things that you don't even want to talk to your husband. I won't say you don't want to talk to your husband about, but he's listening. But sometimes if it's a girlfriend, a friend that's a female, they're more willing to listen to all the intimate things that your husband. Okay, I know that. Okay,
They listen differently.
because men and women are different.
Yes.
Right.
In how they relate to each other.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have friends. Once you're married, there's a space for that. It's nice if that friendship is not completely separate, from your married relationship. So your husband and your friend also have a close connection. Like with my best friend, her husband and my husband are very good friends as well. And so it's and he's in ministry. We have the same things going on.
Makes it nice.
Our life is similar.
So I want to ask this question, talking about the differences between men and women, boys and girls. How do you think it's easier for guys to make friends with one another than for girls to make friends, to be, to go be in relationship with each other?
I think so initially because at first, they play basketball together one time and then they're friends.
Right.
It's easy for them.
Yeah.
They don't have much of the emotional stuff that we have, and
yeah.
so it's easy.
Right.
But as far as finding a lifelong friend or a friend they can completely trust or that they know is going to be there, I feel that takes some years of building and going through things together. But I do think that initially, just becoming friends, I do think they have it easier, which I'm jealous of sometimes. 'Cause
Yeah.
like Jolene said, being at the same school, you do kind of struggle with making friends outside of this community, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But with guys, I feel sometimes they can just up and just have a bunch of friends, and it's oh, okay, well, I don't have any. But, it's harder, I think.
I like to use the example. A guy can go to the basketball court and play basketball, and they're okay.
And they're best
If you're sitting down or somewhere and you go up to another female and just hug her, it's kind of weird. If that makes sense. So I don't know. I think, like Eden said initially, guys do make friends faster than females.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a different type of friendship. For the males, a lot of times it's around activities. What you mentioned, the sports. While for women, it's talking about kind of
Other things.
things that are happening with
Right,
them,
right.
more personal, intimate type things.
Yes, I had to laugh to myself as we were talking about this because my husband, bless his heart, is the only man in our house. And so he's often subject to the conversations about our friendship dramas or things that are going on among us as women. And he's like, ooh, women, like it's so much more complicated.
Yeah.
And emotional, yes. I see some comments. Hazel says, "Thanks, ladies." I was saying it looks like her. But, she's talking about something else. Ashford. But remember, there are friends and acquaintances, so we need to know the difference. Yes.
Right. That's true.
Nick says, "Unfortunately, a lot of Black women tend to be hesitant about opening up to having a friendship. Just be your authentic self, and kindness goes a long way, rather than nice, nasty."
I think that's why we're kind of, at least for me, it's hard to, not hard, but it's kind of difficult to make that initial step to other girls because there are people who just don't look like approachable. That's the word. And me and Eden, we have this conversation all the time about people who, like, at first when we saw you, like, I did not think I would talk to you or be your friend because just, your demeanor, like, when at first glance, but then once I get to know you, it's like, oh, okay, there's somebody else under the initial facial. Yeah.
I think also it's like they said, the nice, nasty type thing. You get that sometimes with girls. I don't know much about guys, but I feel like you get that more with girls because we want to be nice to everybody, but sometimes the intention, I don't want to say the intention isn't there, but it's not always a good intention because we don't know the person. Same thing with you don't trust everybody. You can say, hi, how are you to everybody, but with some people, it's really like you want to know how they are versus somebody else who's just saying it because you have to. You see what I mean? Like, I feel like that's another thing that keeps us from just being able to be friends with every girl that we see because sometimes we're worried that, like, oh, I don't want to come off mean. And I feel like they're coming off a certain way. I don't want to, offend them, or I don't want to be offended
Try
by
too
them.
hard.
Yeah, it's like putting up a blocking point for us because we're scared. At least for me, I think that's what I struggle with sometimes.
I'm glad you're talking about this because that was my next question. What are some of the common challenges that you all have experienced with establishing friendships or relationships? Go ahead.
Sorry, I think I was just going to say I've had times when I've had interactions with people or became friends with people, became close with people, and, like, been like, oh, that's my person, like, we're close, like, that's my friend, even if it's not best friend. And then I find out later that they don't see me that way. Maybe they've talked about me a certain way, or somebody else they see them as that type of friend that I thought I was to them, and it becomes like it's not at all what I thought, and it's sort of like a shame or embarrassment because it's like, I put all myself out there. I overshared maybe, or I became super emotional and vulnerable with you, and then it turns out we don't have the same intentions or things that we're looking for in this relationship. And I think that's hard, and it hurts. It hurts a lot.
Because I think it is an issue. Sometimes people prejudge. You look at a person and you think maybe because they have this, that, and the other, or they have this experience or that experience, or because they have this degree or don't have this degree. And people tend to prejudge. And I think that becomes an issue with friendships versus getting to know a person and really seeing who they really are. Because that's an issue sometimes that I run into.
I was just going to say that, working on a university level with these students, and one of the big issues that come into the sessions is about friends and friend groups that fall apart and jealousy issues. And, so it's such a big issue. But going back to not one of you guys said not judging, maybe it was you, Dr. Matthews, sometimes people are just introverts, right? And so you think like, oh, maybe she's stuck up. She's not saying hi to me, or she's not going out of her way. And it's just that they're introverts and they're really kind people. So it takes time. So not judging before and getting to know someone, that happens often.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to my question about expectations. So like when your expectations are maybe too high because you are assuming things before you really know, that can, become a problem once, you realize that they didn't like you the same way you liked them or whatever. Lillian says some girls have a hidden jealousy and there's no way to truly know that some women are actually your friend.
And that is true.
Yikes.
That's so true. Unfortunately.
And one thing, when you look at a person, you don't know what's going on in their life.
Right.
That's another thing that's important. I always say, if a person has a broken leg, you can look at them and say they have a broken leg or a broken
Right.
arm, but you don't know what background they're coming from, what someone has said to them that has triggered something. I just, what emotions that they're dealing with, because we carry this mask that everything is okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important for us to, if you start a conversation, kind of listen and see what a person is saying, what they're actually going through. It makes a difference.
I think sometimes there's a struggle also with trying to like impress the person that you're trying to become friends with, and then it becomes kind of like a jealousy type thing. Like it's like, oh, I want to impress them, they want to impress you, and so you're just going back and forth with your accomplishments or things that you've done, just trying to make them like you or trying to, whatever. And I feel like that's sometimes where the jealousy sets in, where it's like, why am I in this friendship? Not to have a competition with you over our accomplishments or our achievements, but instead to find somebody I can come to for different things or whatever. And so I think that sometimes can be a struggle when trying to find a friend. Yeah. So.
I think one thing for me is I don't want to come off as I'm trying too hard to be that person's friend, or I'm trying to be a fan. When in actuality, I'm just trying. I'm being nice, but sometimes it can come off as I'm desperate for that person's attention or whatever the case is. So I think that's one hiccup that I've realized when making friends is I don't want to come off that way. Like Eden said, like I may have this impression of what this is, but I'm just talking to you. So there's different hiccups.
Okay, let's just take the same topic, all the things that you all just said about friendships, and put it in the realm of the romantic or potentially romantic relationships. Now we're talking about how do we engage with those of the opposite sex, and how does boundaries become a thing when we're looking at how much to open ourselves up or not to someone that we are romantically interested in.
Who wants to start first?
Maybe I should look to the experts. What advice do you have for these young people about going into romantic relationships?
Well, I think, when I had my eyes open looking for a husband, first starts with a boyfriend. You want someone that's going to be not kind to you, who's going to respect you. As a Christian, I wanted a Christ-like person, and I wanted someone that was going to be in my corner, not someone that's pulling me down. And I think when we start talking about boundaries, we think of physical boundaries. From a physical point of view, that's just, you have a boundary of how far you want that physical relationship to go before you get married. And if you have someone who's pushing that boundary, then maybe you don't need to be a friend of that person's. And then I think someone mentioned how a friend can be making a joke. If a person says something kidding, like, for example, they say, boy, I should have slapped you or something. Okay, then we're not going to be friends anymore.
Don't play like that.
And so you don't close your eyes. I think there's a statement, I'm probably going to misquote it, but it's basically saying that people are, who you see is who they are. I think Maya Angelou might kind of mix it up.
If they show you who
If they show you are, believe them.
Yeah.
A lot of times people in relationships, you're trying to change people. And you don't do that. What you see is what you're going to get after you get married, just more of it.
Mercy.
That's what Pastor Mann said last night. She said, she said, I do is a magnifying glass, not
Not a
something.
magic,
Right.
Not a magic wand. Yeah, that's what she said. Yeah,
It's not gonna. Yeah, it's not gonna.
It's just gonna magnify the issue. Yeah.
Yeah, my husband calls them I do demons, meaning like after you get married, it increases because there's negative things there already. But go ahead.
No, and then you're not, I think I mentioned, you don't try to change a person. And you're not going with someone like a boyfriend, prospectively a husband, that you're trying to save. That's not your job, to save them.
Right.
You want them to be a companion.
You want to grow with them.
You want to grow with them. You want to have a lot in common, and you want to have a mutual relationship.
Yeah, I think it's important to pay attention when you're dating somebody to when red flags go off, do not ignore those red
Yes.
flags. And if there is a red flag, like the boundary needs to be like you turning around and going the other way. So that's
Definitely.
the boundary. And just taking time to really get to know someone and see them in different situations. If we're talking to females, how does he treat his mother?
That's what Nick said.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's really important
Yeah.
because the way he treats you is going to be similar.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what I was going to say.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say
go
just
ahead.
really quick. I think also it's important to know each other's love languages. You know, they talk about the 5 love languages. I think that works for romantic and platonic relationships because I have some friends who I'm not completely a physical touch person, but I can be, and I have some friends who are not. And I think that's something that you have to be able to put a boundary for initially, but especially in romantic relationships. I know you were saying with physical things, whatever, being able to be like, okay, I'm not a physical touch person. I don't want you to touch me, or whatever. I don't. You know, this is how I feel loved in a friendship or romantic relationship, because then you guys can work that out together so that each person feels appreciated
Compromise.
and loved in the relationship, whether romantic or platonic. So.
Yeah, I guess, and the kind of touch, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't touch me like that, but,
Right.
it's okay to hold my hand or
Right.
whatever. Also, I wanted to say, especially for the older ones on this panel, one thing that I don't know that young people appreciate is how much the season of life that you're in will change the kinds of relationships that you have, and even the expectations that you have for those that you are in relationship with, right? So like if you may have a boyfriend in high school, but the standard for what will, qualify him to be your boyfriend in high school
It's not much.
it's basically that he's normal and that he breathes, he doesn't have to have a job. He doesn't have to have a degree. He doesn't have to, right? So you're in high school. If he plays basketball and he's halfway good looking, that's it. Whereas once you leave high school, go to college, and after this, what qualifies a person to be your companion is much different. And the people that are popular in high school are not necessarily going to be the best companions later in life. So maybe there's something else to say about that, but I feel like that perspective is really important to take as well.
Well, when you're in high school or even in college, like you change so much. And so you're right. Whatever qualified him to be your boyfriend in high school, and I say even in college, may not be the same for when you're like 22, 23, 24 years old, and what you're looking for in the maturity level may not be where it should be or where you need it to be a support to you.
So here's my question then. If I'm dating someone in high school, should I be thinking about other qualities beyond just that?
Of course.
You know what I mean? Like, or is it okay to just be like, oh, we're just hanging out. And I know that, later on I'll have different qualifications, or should they already be thinking about some of those other things even now?
Go ahead. Go on. Well, I mean, ideally, we want our daughters to be thinking about that in high school. They may not be thinking about all of those things, but I always told my daughters, they're in college now. I mean, one's older than that, but it's like if you choose someone that doesn't have high qualities, you're going to end up breaking up, and breakups hurt. Whether it's just boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. Like as a mother, you hate to see them go through that, but they still have to make their own decisions, and they may go through a little hard times because they didn't pick a quality person, but they can learn from it. And now they know what they don't want. And I would rather you learn before you get married, preferably.
Right.
For sure.
And I think it's also, this is a little different, but as a parent, you want to pray for your children's spouse. And when you get older, I don't know how many young people in high school are praying for their spouse, but you definitely start doing it when you're in college. You want to pray that the Lord, well, maybe not in college, maybe junior, senior later. But that's just something you want to tell your young person, that you want to pray that the Lord will give you guidance. But when you think of friendships in high school going toward college, you want to hang around people that have the same values that you have. And those are going to be some of the same values that you want in a spouse. There are certain things that you're comfortable with and some things that you're not comfortable with. So you don't want to be hanging around even on the high school level with kids whose values are completely different from yours.
Right.
And if you should have, even in high school, you have goals. What do you want for yourself for the future? And so when you're dating someone in high school, you might not think of, okay, this person's going to fit that, but you want to start thinking in that direction. You're talking about going in this direction in high school, and that person's talking about that direction. You're still keeping it in mind, even though as young people you might not pay that much attention because you get fascinated with some of the physical things and you're not looking at some of those deeper values. But you do have your parents talking to you about it, hopefully.
Yes.
Well, on that point, I'm curious to know two questions, a two-part question. So for the young people, what are some of the lessons that you have learned, even in your young life, about friendships or relationships that you are taking with you? And then for the older ones, what are the lessons that you learned in your own life that you passed on to your daughters?
I think one thing for me that I've learned over the past few weeks, and you've heard me talk about this a lot, is the communication factor, because that literally is so important in every single relationship, romantic relationships, or even mother and daughter, husband and wife, siblings, like in everything, communication is key. And just being honest with one another about how you're feeling, and being able to say, I'm sorry. I think those are really important things. But I think for me, it's the communication factor, because it really makes a really big difference. And being friends with somebody or in a romantic relationship with somebody who is able to do that goes a really long way.
I was going to say, I think Mr. Roper touched on this a little bit. Just when my mom taught me, when going about relationships, specifically romantic relationships, to ask the questions. And even though I'm in high school, and like Dr. Matthews said, just see where their values are. If they're going completely the other direction, you may not want to pursue that relationship. Now, if they're somewhat parallel to what you see for yourself in life, then okay, continue asking those questions. They may not be able to answer all your questions, just like I won't be able to answer all the questions they may have. But just start thinking about those questions and what you may want to write down under those questions. So yeah, that's a lesson that my mom, she's always, even now, just to make sure you're asking those questions when pursuing or being pursued by a person.
That's very important. The advice that I gave to my daughters was, look how daddy treats me. Like, you see how he treats me. Don't bring home somebody less than that as far as treatment, how they're treating you. And so that's just one advice.
That's a good one. Say the same thing. And he does too. My dad, he's always like, make sure you're being, think of how I'm treating your mom.
And honestly, to the dads out there, if there's any watching, like the way you treat your daughter will really set the standard for what she looks for in a spouse.
Without even realizing it.
It
just comes,
Because one thing that I was even impressed with my husband was when I met his family, how they gave him a lot of love. His oldest sister was just patting on him, and so forth, and his brother was just looking at him, admiring him. He's like the youngest, and so I knew he came from a loving family, and to me that was important, and that's something that I wanted my daughters and my son to do, is choose someone that that was a close family, that they were loving toward each other. I thought that was very important.
So real quick, are we saying then that if we become interested in someone and they don't come from a loving home, they don't have the best relationship with their mother, that they are immediately disqualified from being in relationship with us?
No, we're not saying
not
that.
saying that.
Because I'm trying not to give away too much here, but because I've, met young men who, surprised me, because hearing their story, I'm like, you came from a rough experience, and the cards that were dealt you were not fair or the right things that should have been dealt you as a child. But they God has preserved them, and they're very kind and thoughtful and want to live their lives completely different than the way they were brought up. And so you can't just put that blanket type of boundary down and say absolutely but you have to get to know people for themselves. So there are outliers to that. It's not all the time.
Yeah, I just felt like I needed to say that because
Right.
you're not necessarily always going to find that perfect person who came from the loving home and loves his mother and
Right.
everything was great.
Because maybe the mom was not easy to love.
Right.
Or she had
So
mental issues.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of
there's a lot of
factors.
different variables.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good conversation. I don't want to end it without bringing in the Bible
Yes.
to provide a little bit of context as well. I just pulled a few verses about relationships and friendships because the question is, what does the Bible have to say about boundaries? What does the Bible have to say about relationships, right? One that I found was Ecclesiastes 4:9. It says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. The other scripture that I found, let's see, what was the next one? Of course, here we go. Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. So I feel like that speaks to the importance of friendship, the importance of being in relationship. And there may be relationships that we have with individuals that are not blood related, but they are as close as someone who is. And so particularly for those families that maybe, were dysfunctional or whatever, sometimes those friendships can be life-saving, right? Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. So that speaks to, the kinds of people that we surround ourselves with should be those that help us to be better, that we can, we can help one another to be better, I guess, too. And maybe that's one question we didn't talk a whole lot about. We talked about friendships we seek, but what kind of friends are we?
Should be the same of what we're seeking.
Right.
Right.
Let's make sure we're giving what it is we're asking for.
Not making it just one-sided.
Well, yeah. Well, that's kind of what we said, right?
Yeah.
It should go
It's a
both
two-way
ways.
street.
Yeah. And then Proverbs 13:20 says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm.
Yes,
That's a good one.
that's a very good one.
Well, this has been so good, guys. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for all your perspectives, and thank you guys who are watching online. This has been a good conversation. I see many of your comments that you've chimed in on the chat. We definitely appreciate that feedback as well. And we just wish everyone good relationships, strong relationships. Be mindful of the expectations that you have in your friendships and romantic relationships, and definitely set the necessary boundaries to protect yourself, your heart, and make sure that the relationships that you're in are actually mutually beneficial. Real quick, before we say goodbye, I just want to point out how cute we look in our T-shirts. I bet y'all are wondering where we got these. And of course, they came from the Empowerment Weekend. We were selling them, or we were giving them to those who attended, but we also sold them. The pink one is a really fancy one that was quite popular. Yes, so cute, so cute. And in case you might want one, or if you have one and want another, because there's a couple of different designs, they will actually be available next week at the Arts and Authors Fair that we are having here at the Oakwood University Church. So just putting a little plug out there. If you like our shirts and think you want to get one, come out and support that event. That's going to be a lot of fun. Also want to let you know, again, if you did attend the Girls Fight Back Empowerment Weekend, I want to put that QR code up one more time. Please give us your feedback and let us know how that was for you, what you enjoyed most. And we definitely plan on having that again next year. So listen out for the details about that. And later this year, we'll actually have another event, a Women's Empowerment Brunch, which will be lots of fun. And keep in mind that these events are for women of all ages. So Jolynn and Eden, you're expected to come as well. And also one other thing that we have coming up next month, we are going to kick off again our Books and Tea. And this year, instead of going through a book, we are actually going to go through a master class. Esther Perel has a master class on emotional intelligence. And it's kind of a continuation of this conversation about relationships and boundaries and really knowing yourself so that you can be the best person possible in these relationships. So that is March 24th. I think we have a slide for that. It will be here in the Family Life Center. So save that date and make sure that you have it on your calendar so you can come out and join us for that. As we continue, and this is what we're really doing this year, guys, with Women's Ministries, is just trying to be our best selves and improve the possibility of positive relationships, both with our girlfriends and our guy friends and any other relationships that we might have. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you guys for being here. And Committed and Covered is every third Sabbath afternoon at 5, and we'll be back next month. Hope you will join us again as well. Not us necessarily, but Committed and Covered is here every third Sabbath. So make sure you save that date as well. You guys be blessed, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.